Hi, Alan Stratton from Woodturning. For this week's video, I've got to tell you a little bit more of a story. I got a big block of wet, fresh oak from a club member. It was a short stump, and so it was really not appropriate for a bowl. It was too short, or it would have been a really small bowl. So I decided to do something a little bit differently. Years ago in a class, we turned a tube out of similar oak across the grain, and then we looked at how much it would warp. So that's what I initially did for this project, is to see how much it would warp and whether that would be picturesque. However, now it's not very exciting, is it? So I decided to take it to a different level, a different step, and so I said, okay, well, why don't I try and do an exercise in negative space? And so what I've done actually is to create this. It's supposed to be a bowl and not a flower, okay? It's a bowl with negative space. So I sliced these tubes up and splayed them out. The other thing that came together on this was, okay, well, let's do a little bit of thing so on the bottom so that I don't have to turn that last. I turned that first, and a little cover on the bottom, a little segmented ring here, but what really holds it together is this clear UV resin that I discovered about approaching a year ago that cures with UV light, such as this little flashlight, although this is pretty weak as it turns out. So I'm not sure that this is the best bowl that I've ever made, but what it represents is something different. It represents the coming together of different things that I've worked on for a long time. I've worked on segmenting, I've worked on doing lamination like this, I've worked on tubes, I've discovered the UV resin, and I'm exploring negative space. So what does it take to get to the next plateau? I don't know. I don't particularly like this bowl, and I'll show you some pieces of it, but since it evolved step by step, it's kind of hard to show you a completed perfect bowl, but it is the evolution. Now, I don't particularly like this one, but I have some more leftovers. I'm going to take it and take a different direction yet, and take it a bit further. But what would you do with negative space, resin, and tubes? That's the question. Give me your ideas. I've got some. We'll see if they come together and take it to another level. So let's do what we can with this one. I sliced the green oak across the grain in pieces about 3 by 3 by whatever was there. Essentially very deep bowl blanks. The prime pieces were those next to the center where, hopefully, the warpage could be maximized. To start, I mounted each piece between centers, then started cutting corners with my bowl gouge. This is more like a bowl than a spindle. This means that it is easier to cut from the bottom up rather than from the side in. It is interesting that since there is more corner length, the corner gets a bit fuzzy from unsupported cuts, at least until the wood is round. Other than rounding off the wood, the task is to cut tenons on both ends with my skew. My skew is nearly always my preference to form tenons. Now with the wood mounted in the chuck, I can start drilling. I thought it might be better to drill a smaller hole first and then drill the larger hole. At least theoretically, this means that the larger bit has less wood to remove at the center where the wood speed is very slow. However, the smaller bit can only drill as deep as it is long. In contrast, the larger bit is slightly bigger than the Jacob's chuck, and therefore the Jacob's chuck can enter the hole to continue drilling. For me, this is better than using an extension for the bit. With one side drilled out, there is still more to drill from the other side. When rounding before, I did not try to reduce the diameter much beyond the minimum to round it off. I wanted as much wood as possible in the walls while drilling. So now the wood is again mounted to the lathe, but using wood tenon plugs that fit into the end holes. But alas, this is cross-grain work with a lot of short grain, essentially on the tube at 180 degrees apart. Oh well, it is a good thing I have more wood. In subsequent pieces, I did not use the steady rest while drilling and only drilled the larger hole, without drilling the smaller hole first. After 2 weeks to dry, the warped wood is not as dramatic as expected. I am launching into new, strange territory as I try to salvage the project and raise it to a new level. The dry tubes are rough. I gently mount each tube onto the lathe while I reduce the roughness with an abrasive wheel. Finally, I sprayed each tube with rattle can lacquer. I decided that the tube wood would not be strong enough to suspend unsupported out from a base, so I glued up a 5.5-inch ring from oak. However, I also do not trust a single segmented ring to be strong. Now with the parting tool, I am slicing the ring. For this operation, the ring is sandwiched between the two faceplates with double-stick tape. When the cut nears completion, I release the tailstock to reduce binding. This keeps the offcut ring from taking a journey through the shop. After facing off both ring sections, I glue them together again with a half-segment offset. This will provide the strength that I need. After splitting the ring once again and again facing off the sections, I glue it together yet again using the original alignment mark. This means that the center ply is offset. This is definitely stronger than a plain single ring. However, that ring is too wide and too thick. It would not work proportionally with the rest of the bowl. Instead of simply wasting off the excess wood, I cut back only the section that I will need on the perimeter. Remember that this is a 3-ply ring. While still attached, I sand and apply shellac where I can. I'm trying out a 1/16-inch thick parting tool, usually used in metal lathe work. This is mounted to a large handle for hand use. Afterwards, I sand and finish the rest of the cutoff ring. Usually a bowl's base or foot is the last thing to shape. Not so this time, because there will not be anything strong enough or regular enough. Instead, I made a small piece of oak plywood. Now I need to shape it. However, I did not bring live center pressure and the double-stick tape did not hold up to these hard cuts. This small disc took flight past my face shield. No problem, more double-stick tape. This time I do use the live center, padded with a rubber stopper, while I round it off. Then drill a very shallow hole the size for one set of jaws. However, I worry about the drill point poking through the thin piece of wood. So, finish with a box scraper and skew. Then sand and finish this side, the bottom side, before inverting it into the jaws to finish the top side. My plan is to cut the tubes in thirds lengthwise. The question becomes how to do this safely. I considered standing the tubes up on the bandsaw. However, I value my hands and fingers. Finally, I drafted a simple sled that I use for Celtic knot preparation. A scrap board is hot melt glued parallel to the blade, and on the right side I use another board at the side, not in the picture, and yet another scrap plywood as a hold down. These will be hand-held. Marks on the blue tape indicate approximate thirds. This went well. Both the tubes and my hands survived gracefully. About a year ago, I learned about ultraviolet resin. This will be key to holding the project together. With the UV resin, I can apply small quantities of resin and cure each small application. Curing is with a small UV flashlight. However, this flashlight is low power. Since it is a very nice bright day, I run outside with each application for a better cure. Time to purchase a stronger UV source. This is still better than trying to use epoxy, where I would need to clamp a lot of joints. I have decided to space out tube sections at 60-degree angles. A paper template helps. However, nothing is the same size and shape. I do the best I can with the disc sander to shape the sections as they meet in the center. Matching somewhat circular shapes is tough. Once I am happy, I start gluing joint by joint. I also reinforce each tube section with a solid rib. Recently, I attended a demo where the presenter talked about organic and, therefore, irregular shapes. This project will make him ecstatic. Nothing is the same size, shape, angle, elevation, or anything else. A little touch-up with a rotary carving tool and another spray of rattle-can lacquer. This completes this bowl. It will never make it to an instant gallery. However, it does represent the convergence of multiple development threads. It is a step to another level. I have plans for the remaining two sections that should push me further. But, meanwhile, what would you do with them? Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website because my notifications are more reliable than YouTube's. Please tell your friends about my weekly videos. I appreciate your comments and questions. Please wear your full face shield whenever the lathe is running. This is my best safety tip.